Hi and welcome to the much coveted Databases 4. Okay, so where I left you off in Databases 3 is that we had this program and when we run it, it essentially just did a few little SQL queries for us. What we're going to do now, this is kind of a bit of a big jump, so I'm going to show you what the goal is in a different program. Ignore the fact that I just called it Databases, please. I'm going to show you what we're going to make. Notice that I've got a few different flavours. Now, my few different flavours, this is going to be a totally, your choice is, this is going to depend on what you want to make, what do you want it to look like. That's going to depend on which flavour you go with. Alright, so our first one I'm going to show you is the single one. So when I click run on this is what's popped up on my other screen. So it's got customer details and I can click next. It goes through all of, and let me just show you in the background as well. Let me go for what's actually in my table for a second. So that's my table in the background, and it will just flick through every single one at a time. Alright, when it gets to the end, it will go, there's no more records. Without chucking me an error, that's quite nice. Let's go to the beginning. No more records, and I can just keep going backwards and forwards as many times as I want, and it will show me the data for that particular customer. So that's the first flavour. That's seeing one at a time. You might like that, you might not like that. We'll see. Let's have a look at the other flavour. Now I've just got to change my code slightly for a second. Okay. So this is the second flavour. Okay, what you do with this one is you click view and it shows you all of the records in the whole table, and you can just click on any of the tables and it will show you any of the data from any of the tables. And you can also do things like click on it and go delete this one. Let's come up with a fake email. Alex at awesome.com. Add that, thank you very much. We can just, go through these and just go, yeah, okay, we'll add another one, Dave. And then Dave at awesome.com. So that one's quite an interesting one. So there's two different flavours. It's going to be a you pick which one you want. What I will do is I will do the timestamps down in the comments as to where you skip to do either one. So we're going to do the single one or we're going to do the table one. You can do both, but then it's a bit strange to do both. It depends on what you're using it for. Okay, so I'm going to just take a breath at this stage. Give me a quick second just to reset all my project and make sure we're just looking at the orders database. Alright, so I'm now looking at the right project. I'm now looking at the orders project. This is the one that me and you started with back ages ago in like Databases 1. We're going to continue with this project. The Databases 1, you can see that's the one I showed you a minute ago. We're going to just leave that there for now. We're going to continue with this orders one to transform it into something that is just as good as that Databases 1, if not better. Alright. So the first thing we need to do is we need to start by organising ourselves. I'm going to do a separate class which has got the database code in it. Alright, so I'm going to try and keep the database stuff a little bit separate from the GUI stuff. So I'm just going to create a new class. I'm going to call it database handler because it's going to handle all my database requests and everything like that. Okay, in here, let's get rid of this, get rid of this. Now, what I'm looking to do to start off with is create two different methods. One of them is going to execute a string. Now, if I just click back on our code so far, where's it gone? Just there. We've got two different types of SQL query that we're playing with. We've got one that just executes a statement and does something like insert a record or delete a record. Those don't have anything to give back. So we're going to treat those ones very differently to the ones where we need a result set back. So I'm going to try and kind of separate those out. I'm going to have two different queries, one where it gives you a result set back and one where it doesn't give you anything back. Alright, so we're going to do that in the database handler together. Let's do the void one first. So public static void, I'm going to call it execute update query. Now, both of these are going to require a string. So we're going to need to give it a string and then it will execute what's in that string essentially. Now, because we're playing around with databases, we need to do things in try-catches. Now, the thing with try-catches, thinking and talking. The thing with databases is that it can give you a whole wide range of errors back, and we want to be able to see those errors because it tells us some information. So if you don't print out your error message, make that a bit bigger, if you don't print out your error message, that's going to be a little bit like bad news for us later on, because if it's a case that it doesn't connect to the database or something like that, we want to know about it. So print out the errors. Don't just do error like that. If you want to do that, make sure you just dash that error on the end, and if you've called error up here, make sure you've called error down there. Alright, so that looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so now we're going to have to deal with connecting to the database. Now I can just do a cheeky little bit of copying and pasting at this stage, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to nick that bit. Alright, just going to copy it, Control C, I'm going to paste it into here, and it's going to go, do you want to import these classes? That's the same as me right clicking and doing fix imports. Yes, please. They're all the right ones. Let's double check. Java.SQL. Yep, they're all the right ones. So we're happy to go at this stage. Okay. Oh, beautiful. Okay. So now what we need to do is we actually need to be able to execute the query. So we're going to go stmt dot. Now, we've got execute query, and let me just find it for a second. Execute query, and then semicolon at the end. All right, so that is done. That line there, stmt.execute query, is exactly the same as these ones here. All right, so it just executes it, doesn't give us anything back. It just does what it needs to do. For example, you know, add a record or insert, not even add a record, yeah. Insert a record, delete a record, anything like that. Anything that we need it to do, it will just handle it from that point onwards. So that one's fine. All right, let's ignore that. Let's ignore that message. All right, so we've got one more to do in here. Oh, I can't spell. Execute query. And then we're going to do string. Now mine kind of looks the same at this stage in the game. Now I could call it execute query. I could call it execute. I mean, like, that's execute update. If I look at the other one, it's called just execute query. So I'm going to keep it the same as execute query, even though that might confuse us a little bit later, because we need to know which one to call to get the result set back. Alright, it's going to give us a result set back, which is the important bit. And let's go return. And at the moment, we're going to just leave a placeholder of null in there, just for this minute, alright? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my try catch. Try this code. Okay. And in here, now, this is going to look like sloppy code on your end, and I'm going to apologise for that now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse these two bits. So I'm just going to put those two things in there. It's the same thing, so it's connecting to the database, and then I'm basically creating a statement that I can shoot up against that database. Now the reason it looks sloppy is because I'm not a big fan of repeating code lines, but if you try and put these as global variables, and you just kind of leave them up here, you eventually get these error message pop up which say unreported exception, needs to be caught or declared. You might have another one, unreported exception. So they need to be in a try-catch, or should we say at least those bits of them, the end bits, the assignment bits, need to be in a try-catch. And at that stage, what we'd be doing is just taking those words out from each one. Just statement and connection. I just think, you know what, I don't need them as global variables. It'd be better for us to get rid of them the second we're finished with them. So I'm just going to keep them for now, even though it kind of looks a bit like sloppy code. Alright, so apologies for that. It is a little bit sloppy, but it's the neatest way around keeping the connections intact. Alright, okay, now what we need to do is we need to do a result set. I'm going to call it RS. equals stmt dot execute query. Okay, so past that, at the moment, that's not too stressful. That's not too stressful, except it doesn't actually return the result set. Okay, now there's two ways of doing this. I could just put this in here, but then I'd need to define what it is before. So for example, let me fix this with you and show you what I mean. So I'd need to do result set rs up here, and then get rid of this result set here. That's not too stressful, but then it says it might not have been initialized. So it's a bit annoying. The best way to deal with this, to be honest, is to return it here. All right, return the result set. If you get an exception, return null. All right, you could have left that outside, either way, inside or outside. Inside's a little bit neater. Okay, so that's the first step done. Okay, so we've got our two queries. This one's going to execute the query and not return us anything. And this one, we're just going to chuck over strings to it, and it's going to return us a result set. It's either going to return us a result set with the information in it or a result set which is null. Okay, so at this stage we're on to the next part. This is where the paths diverge a little bit. So if you're interested in making the single record one, I'm going to continue with that next. If you're interested in making the table version where you can see multiple records at a time, I will put the timestamp for that in the comments. I'll put the timestamp for both in the comments. But essentially, if you want the table one, pause it here, jump to the timestamp, and then we'll continue from that point onwards. All right, so I'm going to crack on with making my single record one. So the first thing I really need to do is make myself a GUI. So I'm going to go new. I'm going to do JFrame form. I'm not going to touch JPanel. I'm always going to do JFrame form because it gives me a nice window around the outside. Now, it depends. You're not going to call it the same as me. I'm going to call it GUI single. And that way, that I know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a single GUI for a single. I'm looking at a single GUI for a single table. You might call it something like customer view or something like that. That's absolutely valid. Alright, so we need to have a little look at our database just to see which fields we want. Now I'm only going to model one of the tables, so I'm going to look into my little database. Let's have a look at the customers one. So I have got three fields. I've got the customer ID, the customer name and the customer email. You might have 7 fields in your table. You might have 20 fields in your table. However many fields you have, we need to know that. I've got 3 and I'm just going to bookmark that for a second as we're making our GUI. Alright, our next little stage, I'm going to drag on 3 labels. And don't worry if this looks a little bit old-fashioned at this stage. We can jazz it up a little bit later. I'm also going to put in some text fields. Okay, I'm not going to put in a text area. I'm going to put in some text fields. So I've got 3 in there. And then I'm just going to make them all, if it's going to let me. I don't think it's going to let me do 2 at a time for the resize. Just going to make those just a bit bigger so we can see what's going on. Last thing I need on there is a few buttons. Now, what do we want it to do? We might want it to go next. We might want it to go previous. And then we might want some sort of close button on that. We might also want a little label up the top saying something like customers. And then we can just format that however we want. Now down the bottom we've got all my formatting options, so I can play around with this if I wanted to. Make this a little bit bigger and go, yes, that seems fine by me. Let's write that in again. Customers. I had customer ID. I clicked off of it. Customer. Got to press enter, otherwise it doesn't register. Customer name. Alright, notice that it's resizing it as I'm doing it. And again, if I want to just click and drag and make these a bit bigger so you can see them, you totally can. Alright, so at that stage, we need to be a bit brave. And let me just rename these buttons as well. Oh, didn't mean to click on that. Let me just go back to the design tab. By the way, if you click on these, all it's going to do is create you a method that goes along with the button. Alright, so if I clicked on J button 2, you notice it went to this button, J button 2 action performed. Alright, we know that at this stage, J button 1, J button 1 action performed. It's going to create those methods when I'm clicking on them for the first time. So now I've got all my J buttons. Now these have got really bad names, really bad names. You can see them in the list down here. It kind of looks a little bit pants. So I'm just going to change these a little bit, and I'm just going to go properties. Let me find the bit where their name is. Actually, no, there's an easy way of doing this. Much easier way of doing this. I'm going to do change variable name right there. So instead of J button 2, previous is what I'm going to call it. Obviously, it's not renamed it here, but it has renamed it down there, and we're going to see it just as the word previous. Previous action button performed, okay? And if we want to change the text on it, just edit text. Alright, so if I do the other one, I'll do edit text. I've called it name, or should we say I've put name next on it, but it's still called J button 1. So whatever I click on, it will highlight it down here. Alright, this is just the navigator panel. If you don't have that, by the way, you can find it in here somewhere. If you can't see it, just click reset windows and that should pop up. Alright, let's go. Previous. Oh no, we don't want to call it previous. It's me being silly. Next is what I want to call it. And then this one's going to be called close. Should we call it exit instead? Let's call it exit. Alright, so that's looking fairly decent at this stage. Now, we might want to get rid of the custom text that's already in here. And I'll show you why. I'm just going to delete the first one and you'll see what it looks like. So at this stage, I'm going to go back to my project window. Alright, now I'm going to click on my orders class. Now this is the one where we had all of our code in it. Alright, now at this stage we don't need all of this code. It's there basically as our backup if we go horrendously wrong. So I'm going to be a little bit wary. I'm just going to comment that out for now, and later on, if we get worried, we can then uncomment it and put that back in so we can run it and see what it does. Now what I need to do at this stage is just create a new GUI. So GUI single equals new. Alright, GUI single, have I called that? Oh, there's a lowercase s on it. Alright, single dot set visible and then true. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Alright, I've got two monitors, so I always have to drag things across. There we go, that's what our form looks like right now. Now, it's looking fairly decent. The size of it's looking okay. We can change around these things again. We can change the colours, we can change the background, that kind of stuff. But more importantly, look at what's in the text fields. So if I click, the one that I deleted has got nothing in it. I've got my label, it says customer ID. But this one says JText field 2, JText 3 field 3. If I wanted to type something in, I'd be typing in next to it. If I click in it, I'd have to double click to type over it. That could be really annoying, so we want to leave those blank so it looks nice and neat. Of course, none of my buttons do anything at the moment because we haven't told them to do anything. So let's go back. So we were looking at GUI single, which was just here. So I'm just going to get rid of the text that's in it just to make it look a little bit nicer. And then we'll put some things on the button. Okay, so exit button. What do we want the exit button to do? To be honest, system.exit, that'll do. Let's just test us for a second. Job done. So that works absolutely fine. So my exit button works fine. It's now looking at what do we do with the previous and next buttons. Okay, so again, let me just put that in the middle because otherwise that's going to bug me. So what we're going to do, the plan now is to, when we show this form, we're going to start looking at getting the information from our database and putting it onto this form. That's our next job. Alright, so the first step we're going to need to take, let's go to the source code. Let me just get rid of my output box just so we can see this fully. So we've already done the exit button. We're now on to the previous and next and putting stuff from our database into those fields. Now the key to this whole choice that we've made, the key to the whole thing in terms of it being able to show you the right ones, is to keep a track of which record we're looking at. That's the biggest key thing. So we need to know which record we're looking at, we need to know which one's next, and if there's any behind us. So as long as we can do that, this whole thing is fairly straightforward. So the way we're going to keep track, I'm going to go to the source code. Now, some people get very overwhelmed by all the stuff in here. Like, you've got this generated code, there's tons of stuff in there. Let's not worry too much about that at this stage, all right? Just think about it as methods that do certain things. Now, right up the top, I'm going to do a new variable. Okay, so I'm going to call it int ID. All right, I'm going to set it to be 0. And the whole point of this is to keep track. Alright, we only need it to keep track of the record while this particular form is open, but we do need to keep we need to keep track of it through different methods. So in our different kind of click methods where we've got our action performed. So as long as we can keep track of it in this little global variable called int_id, then we're happy to go. Alright, now once we've done that, we're going to crack on with our first little task. The first one we're going to do is the next button. So I'm going to come down here, let's do the next button. I'm going to get rid of this and make this a little bit bigger. So this one's the first one that we're going to play around with. Now, all of the code we're going to do is essentially inside a try-catch. So we'll just whack that in first. If I could spell, yep, I can spell apparently. And again, we're getting into the habit of printing out these exceptions, because if there is an exception, I want to know about it. I was being nice and neat on the other page, and I've changed my mind again. Let me just do, just lazy putting just the in there. Alright, so if there's an error, I want to know about it. We're going to fill up some try-catches. We're going to put some code inside this part. Alright, so the thing we're going to do first of all is we are going to try and get all of the customer records. For us to do that, we're going to use, let me just minimize the database one. We're going to use our database handler to do that, because that gives us all of the results set back. So we're going to do result set, in one word. We'll call it rs equals database handler dot. Okay, so what we're doing is we're trying to get all of the customer records back as a list. Because we're getting it back as a list, we're going to use the one that gives us the result set back, not the one that doesn't return anything. Alright, so I want execute query. Alright, this is the one that I wrote. Okay, a little bit earlier with you guys. There's a few things here, let's leave that blank for a second. Let's put an empty string in there for a second. So the result set, now we haven't got any imports in here at the moment, so it's going to basically tell us off for that. Let me get rid of some of the comments up this way, just to make this a bit cleaner. So let me just right click, fix imports. Hang on a second. Cannot find symbol result set. You need to... Hang on, I've spelt it wrong. Let's do that again. Fix imports. Java.SQL result set. So not results set. Hasn't got two S's in the middle there. That's me being silly with typos. So let's import that. That will chuck me a java.sql.result set. So we are using this import. Make sure we're using the right one. And then we're going to carry on at this stage here. Now what we want to do is select all of the fields from, and then some of you last time were like, oh, we're not sure about uppercase or lowercase. This isn't case sensitive. I'm just typing it in uppercase just to make it obvious that it's an SQL statement, to be fair. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a look. Now, I need to remember what I named things. So I've got my database, so in the services tab, I've got my database and my table name, so TBL_customers. Alright, so that's where I want to get my information from. So I'm going TBL_customers. That will get all of the fields from customers. So all of the records, all of the data, everything from the customers' records. Okay. Once we've got everything, now this is going to be a bit strange. We're going to add one to the ID field. Oh, ++. Let me find ++ on my keyboard. Oh my god. plus plus, there we go. All right, now the reason for that is when we're doing databases, when you go through a result set, the first row is the first row. Is not row 0, so it's a bit strange from that point of view. So we're going to do ID plus plus just to make sure that we've got all of the records in order. Then I'm going to do something weird. Okay, so I'm going to do rs dot last. Okay, so what this is going to do is going to be setting this to the last row in the database. All right, so I'm basically saying give me the last row, set my pointer, because it all works on pointers. So instead of row 1, which is this one, I'm setting it to this one. All right, so I'm saying look at the last one for a second. Now the reason we're doing this is for a little bit of error checking, because if it is the last row, then it's a case that we're essentially going to get the index of it and see if it is the last row in the database. So we're going to go if the ID matches the thing that we've just got, the row number, then we're on the last one. All right, so let's just do a little bit of error checking and you'll see why I'm using this rs.last. So sets the pointer. Oh. So the point of this is that it sets the pointer to the last record in the database. So what I can do is I can get the row number. So I can go, okay, the last record in the database is number 5, which is here, and I can get the pointer for it, which is what I'm going to do in a second, and I'm going to see if that pointer matches what the ID is. All right. If it matches, then I need to say some sort of error message like there's no current records or you've reached the end of the records. If the ID is less than or equal to this particular row number that we get when we're doing rs.last, we're going to get that row number. If it's less than or equal to it, then we can display the record. So it's a bit of error checking on our part. Let's stay with me. So ID, if ID is less than or equal to, and we're going to do rs.getRow. Okay, that will get the pointer for the last row. Now I've set the pointer to be look at the last row, get the pointer for the last row. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to change the pointer. All right, because we're saying, okay, we're not at the last record, so we must have something to show. Let's put the else part in so we get that bit later. So let me just print it out at this moment. And we'll make this fancy a little bit later. No more records to display. Okay. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to get the... Alright, so the next bit that we're going to do is we're going to now move the pointer. So we were looking at the last record and we were saying, okay, the pointer's pointing at the last record. And we're saying, is this ID... Are we looking at the last record? Are we already on the last record? If it's on the last record, then it's a case we can display the very last record. But if it's more than that, then we haven't got any more records to display. So what we want to do is we want to reset the pointer. I know this is a little bit tricky. Think of it as resetting the pointers. It's always pointers when we're playing around with the result set index. So we're going rs.absolute. Okay, and we're going to give it the ID. So we're saying point the database pointer to the record that we want to look at, which is, again, the ID. The point of it is to keep our place in the set of results. So we're saying point database to current record. All right, you can label that as something like gets the current record or something like that, because ID is the record that we're on. All right, so when we started at 0, once we loaded this, we then went, okay, we're incremented to number 1. All right, so we go, okay, that's number 1. I then said, okay, the pointer's 1. Set the pointer for the database to be the last record. So is 1 equal to 5? No, it's not. Okay, set the pointer to be back to 1, and then we're going to grab this information here. All right, it feels like a little bit of jumping around, but the idea of it is to just error check to see if there's anything in there in terms of silly things that we can you know, avoid in terms of errors. The next bit's actually really nice and easy. Really nice and easy. So we've got our, now we've got to do a little bit of a tidy up for a second, because we've got our fields, and I was going to say we're going to set our text fields to be things like the password, sorry, not the password, to be things like the ID, the customer name, the customer email. But we need to know what those are, because I don't know, I couldn't guarantee you that JText field 3 was the user ID or not. So let's come back to the design view. Now I'm going to change the variable names in here, all right, of just the text fields, just for now. So I'm going to do change variable name, so customer ID field. I'm going to put the word field on all of them, just because I know that's just the field rather than any sort of record or anything like that. We're going to do change the variable name, customer name field, change variable name, field. Okay. So at that stage, you can see they've changed down there. So at least we know that we're setting the correct ones now. All right, so I'm just clicking back on source. Let's get back to where we were. So we've got, let's go with customer ID field dot set text. Okay, now we've already got our results set. We already know that we've got our results set. Now, the problem that we've got with the first one, our first one's the harder one, the other, because the first one's an integer, so this one's the trickier one out of the three, because I need to do a little bit of conversion. If I could spell, that'd be great. To string. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is get a number and convert it to be a string. So I've got rs dot get int, and what we're saying here is get the name of the field that has got the customer ID in it. So let me just have a quick look. I called it customer ID with no spaces, just like that. It can be lowercase, that is not a problem, so that should work fine. Let me just double check ourselves. So this line here, rs.getInt, that should remind you of the stuff that we did a little while ago, because we've got things in here like rs.getInt customer ID. It's the same as this bit here, but I'm just putting the result of it inside a text field. All right, so we're doing essentially this block of it in terms of the code that we've previously seen. That's the commented out bit. All right, from our first method. Let's go back to this bit here. We've got two more to do in here, so we're going to do customer name field dot set text rs dot get strings, because it is a string. I was double checking myself there. I think I called the other ones just the same, customer name, customer email. All right, I'm going to try and remember that. And then I'm going to cheat slightly. Do like a quick cheat if I can copy and paste it. Customer field set text customer email. So hopefully I've got that same customer email. Okay, so that is that part ready to go. Now the only kind of dodgy part that we've got, the only kind of dodgy part is that we've got just no more records to display. So we're going to fix that now, and then I'm going to actually let's just do one bit of housekeeping first, because at the moment we've got our record set, or our result set even, we've got our result set open, and I really don't like leaving those result sets open, because if you do that you're going to have a few issues. So what I'm going to do just under here is I'm going to do rs dot, and then I'm going to do close. So that's my little bit of housekeeping. All right, just to make sure that that result set closes itself before we hit any problems or anything like that. Now, I want to actually put on the form there's no more records to display, because otherwise it might cause us a bit of an issue if you don't want to be looking at the output box while you've got your form hovering around. So let's just put a label on here. So let's go label, Make it a little bit bigger. Some people get a little bit excessive with this because some people set the text to be bright red. They set it to be, really big, and it gets very, a bit in your face a little bit quick. So just be sensible with what you're setting down here. Now at the moment I'm just going to do change variable name error message box, because that way you know what it is and I know what it is. Now I'm also going to edit the text in it to have nothing in it at the moment. Okay, doesn't mean that it's changed size or anything like that. It's still there, but there's just nothing in it at this stage. Okay, so I'm going to come back here. Now we had a few things we're going to do in here. The first thing I'm going to do is set that error message box. If I could spell message dot. Now I want to make sure that that is empty. If I don't set that to be empty, then that might cause us a bit of an error later on. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to put it in here. So I'm going to put the error message in here instead of printing it out. Okay, so I'm going to put it actually on the screen. So that's in there. So if I get anything, it's going to appear on the form. So that's absolutely fine. Set text error, and then that's going to appear on the screen. I also want to put it in here, so I've got the no more records to display. So let me get rid of this first bit. Apparently I'm not allowed to copy and paste it. Alright, so what we should have now is my error message box. So my error message box is good to go. And it should show up with what my different bits are. So if I've got a record, it will show me the record. If not, it will show me an error message. Now let's give you a little bit of a demo at this stage, because we've made something. We've made something and it's actually fairly impressive. Alright, so you've seen this cheeky little chat before. Just click next. Whoa, it does a thing. It totally does a thing. And we can just keep going till we get to the end. No more records to display. Wonderful. And then I can't do anything. Obviously, my previous button doesn't do anything at this stage. My exit button still exits the program. So, that's one down. We're one down. Let's get the next one done. Previous button action performed. Okay. So, with the previous button, it's a little bit like a similar and different of what we've just done, to be honest. So I'm just going to copy bits. So first of all, if I click the previous button, we want to make sure that we set the error message to be nothing. So it's just tidy cleaning stuff up, really, isn't it? Try catch, and then we're going to do exception. Okay, I'm going to nick that from down the bottom here. Obviously, my only issue here is that if there is a problem, and my form crashes or something like that, it might not actually update the form. So I could also do the South tab and just put error in that part as well, just to double check. I mean, it means that you've got errors printing out everywhere if there is an error, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, let's keep going. So we're doing the inverse of what we did here. All right, so you should be able to be all right with this. So let's go ID minus minus. All right, because we're going backwards. So we're going backwards, that's fine. Then what we want to do, we're going to do if ID, now this one's a little bit easier, is more than or equal to 1, right? Because we know that 1 is going to be the first record. It's always going to be the first record. If we've got no records in our database, then this is going to give us a bit of an issue. But we can cater for that a little bit later. Here we didn't know where the end was. It might be that we have 3 records or 7 records, but we know the start. We know the start is always going to be 1. So we're just going to go if ID is more than or equal to 1. So if it is more than or equal to 1, let's do that again. RS dot. Hang on a second. I've been a muppet. Because I've missed out a whole line. I got overexcited. We haven't actually run the result set part yet. Alright, so we still need to do the same thing from down here. So you can see this bit down here, I'm just going to nick it and paste it up here. All right, get rid of the double equals. So we still need to get all of the records. So every time we're clicking the button, if there's a change to the database, we're just getting all the records and we're going to select them directly from the table. You could argue with me that this is inefficient. There's different ways of doing it. And, you know, that would be absolutely valid. But at this stage, we're not going to muck around with objects or anything like that just yet. So, okay, let's just keep going. So we've got ID is more than one. Okay, then we should be able to go results set. Dot, because we actually have a name for the list now, absolute ID. Okay, so we're saying set the pointer to be the ID. All right, wherever the ID is, set the pointer to the database to look at the record for the ID. All right, and then we've got these bits down here. I told you it was a copy and paste job. Once you've done one, all the rest of it just fits in nice and easily. Oh. All right, so we're just setting the name. So we're saying, okay, get the name, get the ID, get all the customer name, customer email, get all those, put those in. And what we've got is just one little cheeky bit in here. So we're saying, okay, if we have got to, hang on a second, I put my error message part in the wrong part earlier. No, that's fine because we haven't done that. What am I saying? We need to just do an else statement. We haven't done our else statement part. I was looking for the else statement part, but I didn't have it because I didn't put it in. All right, here we go. So what we're going to do in this stage, we need to say, okay, so we're going to go, we're going to set the J label. So it's error box dot set text, and we want to say no more records to display. All right. Now at this stage, if we don't increment the ID, we are going to have a problem, okay, because we're going to infinitely go backwards. What we want to do is if we reach the last record, we want to keep it so that we're looking at the last record. We're not looking at errors or anything like that. So we're just incrementing the ID just to bring it back to 1. So if we're minusing 1 off of it, if we just walk through it, we're saying get all the records, it would have got the whole list. If ID was 1, it would have set it to be 0. Then it would have gone, okay, ID is not more than or equal to 1, so there is no previous record. So what we want to do here is say there's no more records to display and make sure that we're still looking at record 1. All right, so we're still looking at record 1 when we've got to the end. Now that's another thing we didn't do in my next button one, because what we didn't do in the next one is minus it, because at the moment we're going to have a bit of a problem. It's just me tidying up after myself now. When we get to the end here, what we want to do in the else part is we want to do ID minus minus. Okay, so if we get to the end, let's say I've got 5 records, and it goes, oh, okay, incremented to be number 6. It will go, oh, we haven't got a record 6. No more records to display. And then we want to go, okay, the current pointer needs to go back to record 5 because that was a valid record. If it was still 6 at the end, it would have given us strange error messages. And you would have seen that when I went backwards in a second. Okay, last little bit I've got to do is just rs.close, which is my housekeeping bit, which is just going to be tucked in under this else statement, and then we'll give it a little bit of a roll. Let's see what we've made. Okay, next we can get to the end, no more records. We can go backwards, no more records. Now if I didn't do this ID++ bit, what you would have seen is that when I clicked on previous and I go, okay, it showed me the previous one, that would have been valid. If there is no previous one, now if you look at my database, Carter's the first one in my database. So if I go back, no more records to display. If I didn't do, let me just click around for a second. So if I didn't do this ++ part in this previous, what would happen now is when I click next, I would have to click it twice to show me the next record. But I don't. All right, so because we put those in, that absolutely works. Okay, now what you could do is, because we can get the ID here, we can easily do things like delete the record, and we can do things like grab the ID and then do a delete record where the customer ID equals a certain thing. So let's try and have a go at that next. All right, so what we're going to do is let's put another quick button on here. So we're going to do button. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't go over my text box. Okay, ooh, double clicked on it. So we've got J button 1 action performed right down the bottom there. That was a very quick double click, my apologies. Edit the text. Delete record. All right, delete record. And then we're going to go change variable name. Delete record. Okay. So what they might do is they might go for searching for a particular particular thing, record. We might go, all right, we're going to try and delete Carter, and then we'll see how we get on. Now we're going to put some code in here. With everything we do with databases, everything really ideally needs to be in a try catch. So let's just do that, try, and then we're going to just do catch. It's all deemed as risky behaviour. If I could spell, that'd be lovely. Exception. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to, and again, because we know the ID of it, that's nice and easy. So we know where we are. Ignore all of this code here, because that's just scary code that we don't need to worry about just yet. We've got our previous button and next buttons. All right, I'm just going to minimize a few of those. So I've got the next button one just there, because we're going to do something similar-ish to this, but we're essentially going to do it a little bit easier. Okay, so we're going to do, okay, so delete button action performed. What we need to do is we need to get the ID of where we are currently. So let's just put this on my screen properly so you can see what I'm up to. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is start pinching bits. So I need to nick the SQL statement, and I'm going to just nick ID++, so they're going to go straight in like that. Now we can skip quite a lot of these parts, so I'm just going to nick this bit essentially, just that bit. And I'm going to show you the method to my madness in a second. Okay, so we've got select all of them from TVL customers. We've got ID++. Now we don't necessarily need to do ID++ because we've already incremented it to be looking at the record that we want. All right, now let's just for a second delete that. We're saying rs.getAbsoluteID. Okay, and then we've got customer ID. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to prove a point for a second. So all I'm going to do is print out. So when we click on the button, I'm going to get rid of this for a second. All right. When I click on the button, all it's going to do is print me out the customer ID of the record that we're looking at. Because if we can get the customer ID of the record that we're currently looking at, what I can do is I can do a delete statement, and I can go delete in the customer tables where the customer ID equals 9, and it will just delete me that whole row. So if we can get the ID, then we are home and dry. We can do an easy delete function. Okay, so let's just go run that. Let's just do next. So we've got 2. I don't know where my output button is. 2. Lovely. Let's click next. All right, hang on a second. This is because I haven't done very nice housekeeping. All right, so a little bit of a warning to us there for a second. We got carried away. If you don't close your result sets, things freeze. All right, so if you try and run another result set, if you don't do this housekeeping bit, risky behavior, stuff freezes. All right, I'm going to do the exact same thing again. All right, so I'm going to go next, delete record, just prints me out the ID. Last time I clicked this, it froze. It doesn't freeze anymore. Delete record. So I've proved to you that I can get the customer ID. If I can get the customer ID, we just need to send a delete line over to our database handler. So what we're going to do at this stage is we're going to do get the customer ID, and we're essentially just going to chuck it straight over to database dot. And then we're going to do execute update. So this one doesn't return us anything. And we're essentially just going to do a delete function in here. So we're going to do a delete from TBL customer. Let's spell this properly, please. So we've got delete from TBL customers. Let's just double check that I've got delete from TBL customers. I've definitely got TBL customers. TBL customers up there. I don't know why I clicked off. It was already up there anyway. Where? And we've got customer ID equals, and then this is the bit that goes outside of my little query. All right. Let's get rid of this bit now. Okay. What we can also do is we could chuck out a message up in our little error message box. So we're going to just do error message.set text. I'm not going to put error in it. Let's go record deleted. All right. Job done. So let's have a little cheeky look at what we've just done. Now I'm going to, in the background, just see what goes on here. So I've got, okay, next to no more records. Let's go to Dave. Delete the record deleted. Okay, so let's go previous. Let's go here again. View my data. Dave is still showing. Why is Dave still showing? Alright, so at this stage we know that our code is not quite working. Even though we click delete, it's still showing us the ones that we've deleted. And even though, if we look in our database, we've got view data, we've still got the offending item in there. So I'm going to show you how I would debug this, because there's going to be a silly error in there somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the whole of that. I'm going to come into this one. I'm going to click view data. Alright, so at the top it's just running this. At the moment I'm just going to paste in my delete from. And let's just change that to be something else. So customer ID, that whole part there would have been something like 11. Alright, if this runs and Dave gets deleted, then we've got a problem elsewhere. So it's run, view the data, Dave has been deleted. So it's not the delete part that is our problem here. We've got a problem somewhere else. So let's have a look at our problem somewhere else. We could have had a problem in this part. Didn't print out any error messages in here. This is the wrong program. Let me go back to my problem. This is a problem we're having loads of things open. Alright, so let me just double check we got the right one open. So this was I was going to say the error messages were a lot nicer when we did it. Alright, so let's just have a little bit of a, this didn't actually print us anything out, did it? So let's just do a little bit of a breakpoint on that. Let's go Carter, delete record. Okay. So that looks the same. Delete from TBL customers where customer ID equals 2. Alright. Alright, let's see what's going on. So it does that part. Does that part. Executes the query. Okay, interesting. So that part gave us an error message back. Did it print my error message? Where's my output box? No, it didn't. Alright, now we've found the offending item. After a minute or two of head scratching, I made a rookie mistake in our database handler. This execute query method is for when you want a result set back. Notice that this is exactly the same as this. What I actually wanted was an execute update. So let's just do execute. Oh, hang on a second. Let me sort my life out. Can't actually spell today. Execute update. That's the one we want. That is the one that we want. So hopefully, let's cross our fingers for a second. That was such a funny error message to get, wasn't it? We got no error message. We just didn't know what was going on. Okay. Let's try it again. Delete record. All right. No more records to display. That's interesting that it is now frozen. All right. Just quickly notice that we haven't actually put anything in our catch part, which is going to not help us if we're debugging stuff. Let's print out that error if we need to. Okay. So that is catching at the moment. Alright, I've been doing a bit of thinking about this error and it's tied me in circles for a second and then it's just hit me in the face that we're doing something silly, because what we're trying to do is access the database from two parts or from two different kind of requests when we should just be doing it once. Now what we need to do is just rejig around our code slightly and it's going to totally fix our problem, hopefully, fingers crossed. So I'm going to do int and then I'm going to do record ID equals. Alright, once I've done that, I don't need the result set anymore. So the result set being closed down here, but open when we wanted it to be closed, is what's causing our issue. Alright, so let me just plonk that around. Now all I've done is I have ripped out the customer ID from the record ID. So I've ripped out the ID, the customer ID that I need, and I've stored it, and then I've closed the result set. That now enables me to carry on playing around with my database, because what was happening is it was locking me out of it, and that's why we had the freezing. So let's just do a quick test. Fingers crossed. James, delete record. Done. Carter, delete record. Done. Then I can't go back to them. Julie, delete record. So that's no more records to display. And we've deleted all of them. So that solved our problem. Basically what we had going on, and I've deleted all my records in my database now, even though we've got this in here, is that we were kind of locking ourselves out of my database. Now obviously I haven't got a field to add some more records in at this stage. If I just ran this again, everything would be out. So let me just insert a few just very quickly. And then I'm just going to put J email. That's terrible, but still. And let me just add another one. It's just Carter. If you don't know Carter, he's a lovely student in my uppers at the moment. Alright, Carter at carter.com. Lovely. Let's just go. That is done. That is good to go. Alright, if we just run that again, let me just double check myself. So again, when you're making these requests to this database, and that was a really nice lesson for us because we saw that there wasn't any issue with our SQL. So if we go back to our GUI single, there wasn't any issue with this at all. And I tested it. You saw how I tested it, so that was interesting. So we knew that that worked, but we didn't know why it was hanging, and it was totally because if we're already accessing the database somewhere and we try and re-access it somewhere else, it's totally going to lock us out. And it was waiting for my first request to unlock the database. It was waiting for that to finish for me to have access. So we essentially caused ourselves a deadlock, which we've now resolved because we can now go backwards and forwards and muck around with things as you saw. Alright, so that is the first one done. It totally works. I can delete one and then carry on. So we've got no more records to display. Deleted things. That one totally works now. Alright, just to definitely show you guys that it works, what I've done is I have changed my database by putting in some more data. So I've got all of my records down there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's just run it again. Oh, where am I? Where am I? What are we doing? Alright, so I'm just going to run it again. So I'm going to head over to this way and run it. Let's have that in the background so you can see what I'm actually doing. Alright, so if I go, okay, next it's going to show me one. I don't think I put any email address for myself. No, I left that null. Alright, so I've got to the end, I've got to Alex. If I click delete, says record ID 6 deleted. So I updated the message just to say which record is deleted, even though I need to sort out the formatting of that. It doesn't look like I've deleted it here, but if I go previous, we've got Jevon. If I click next again, no more records to display. Okay. If I run this again, it's got rid of my last one. So that one absolutely works now, that delete record button. Alright, so that is the first part done. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to close this particular form and I'm going to now move into showing you how to do this with a table instead of doing it with a single record at a time. So we're going to have a bash at the table way of doing it in our orders project. Alright, so at this stage what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making the table version of the single one that I just showed you. Now obviously with the single one you don't have to choose both, you're not choosing both, you choose one or the other. This is just a different flavour of showing your information from a database. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, new JFrame form. Alright, so I'm going to call this, now you're not going to call it GUI table because you're probably going to call it something a lot more intelligent than GUI table. And there's a few things I'm going to put on here straight away. So the first thing I'm going to put on here, let's find combo box just there. So I want a combo box, I want to make that a bit bigger. And I want a button. I'm going to change the button, so I'm going to do edit text, view data. And I'm also going to call it view data button, because that makes more sense when I'm looking at all this stuff down here. Alright, so my combo box, at this stage we're just leaving that for a second. There's one last little bit that I need, which is a table. So I'm looking for the table part in here, and I'm just going to click and drag that underneath. Alright, might need to just resize things, make it look a little bit nicer. That's the template that we're going to work from. Now there are a few other things that I showed you on my other one, on my example one, but we'll add those as we go through. So I'm just going to kind of stick with these basic ones for now and just work until we can see some data in here. So next little job we've got to do is actually change the drop down box to actually show the table names. Now when we're doing this part I want to try and save us a job in a few minutes time, so I'm just going to click on the combo box, right click, customize code is what I clicked on, so it's just right click, customize code down the bottom. Now at the moment what it's got as the default kind of set of things in it is item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4. Now what I want is that when I click on the drop down box it's going to show me the tables that I can view. And the thing that we're going to try and do here is match what the table names are, but this is the kind of user view of it. So I'm just going to chop off the TBL underscore part and just put customers. So that's my first table, customers. This next one's not particularly pretty. So we've got order to product link. All right, 2 more to go. Orders product. Now let's just take a minute, let's double check that these match exactly these bits without the TBL underscore part. Alright, okay, I think that's good to go. Alright, you'll notice that the little default item 1 bit disappeared and that is absolutely okay. So what last thing we're going to do, let's pop over to orders, let's just see what we've made so far. So I'm going to put GUI table, oh, let's give it a name. Set visible. Alright, so what we've got so far, and again I just drag it off from my other screen, so I've got the little drop down with all of my different tables in. Now the idea is I want to be able to click on orders and then click view data and it updates this table. Alright, so that's the goal, that's where we're going towards. Let's go back to GUI table. Ooh, which one's the right one? Let's just make sure I'm looking at the right one, not the example one. Here we go, that's the right one. Okay. So the next job, we're going to be starting to sort out the data in this particular panel. Alright, so let's just have a little bit of a look at the code. Let me just get rid of that output box and I'm going to go to the source. So in terms of what it looks like so far, it doesn't look particularly impressive. We've just got all of our default code in, and again we've got some things in here that are a little bit interesting. This is the particularly interesting bit, which is the table part, but we're going to come on to that in a few minutes time. Now the thing that I haven't got is my view button action when you click on it. So I'm just going to click on design and then double click on my button. Alright, that's going to create me my view data button action performed method. Okay, so what we're going to do is what's going to happen when I click on view data. Alright, now the way that I'm going to get this program to actually update the table is to have a method that is called update table data. Alright, so let me just start, and I know this is going to be a bit strange because I want to separate this part out. So what's going to happen is this view data button, when I click on it, is going to call another method, and my other method is going to be called update table data. So let's just crack that in. Now the reason I'm doing this is just so that I could separate out few of the different methods, because we've got a lot of methods that are going to be calling this update table data part, and I want to be able to do this from anywhere really. So we're just going to crack this into a different method. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. Now this first method that we're going to do is a little bit tricky, and the crux of it essentially is what we're going to do is we are going to, if I click on design, so we've clicked on view data, it's going to take the table name that's in here and run an SQL statement. And then what it's going to do is from the SQL statement it's going to build this table. And what I mean by build this table, it's going to look at how many different rows are returned and how many different columns are returned for the SQL statement that I run, and it's going to dynamically update this table. At the moment it just looks like there are 4 rows and 4 columns. Well, what's actually going to happen when we run it is that we're going to have as many columns and rows as we need. Whatever's passed back from our SQL statement, we're going to be able to update this little screen just here. So let's just crack on with this now. So the first thing we're going to do is results. The very first thing we're going to do is a try catch, because every time we're playing around with databases or anything like that, we are going to chuck our things into a try catch. Alright, so that's that done. Next thing we're going to need is to run our SQL statement. So we're going to do results set, all one word. So the database handler is the one that actions all of the information that we give it. So that's where we're going to run our SQL statements. Now the thing that we're going to send it is a select statement. So the select statement is going to give us a result set back. So we need to do execute query, not execute update query. So we're going to do the top one. Alright, and the thing that we're going to do is a select statement. So let me just finish that part by putting a semicolon on. We're going to do select everything from, and now this is the bit where I'm going to try and be a little bit creative. I'm going to do TBL underscore plus. Now we need to find the name of the combo box at this point. The combo box that I've got it called is JComboBox1. Now if you weren't sure what yours was, and maybe you've been different and selected several different combo boxes, if you come back over here and you click on it, it will click on the one or shade out the one that it's selected just there. Or you could just do right click on it and you could do things like change variable name and it will tell you. So we've got JComboBox1 there. We could change that to be table list combo box. That seems right, because I want to know that it's a combo box and I want to know that it's a combo box which lists all of the tables. Alright, let's go back to the source and we're just going to go plus that. Okay, so that's going to run that result set. Now we've got an issue here because we just need to fix the imports. Do you want this one? Make sure we're using Java.SQL, that's fine. Alright, then that's going to update that. Okay, so our next job is a little bit tricky. We've got a few tricky bits to do. So what we're going to do is we are going to get the selected item from the combo box. Alright, because obviously it might be a case that, you know, we've got the thing selected and we want to get the thing that's selected so that we can play around with that. Alright, so at this stage in the game what's going to happen is it's going to get the combo box, but not necessarily the thing that is selected in the combo box. So we need to do a little bit more here just to get the selected item. So we're going to do a little dot, and then we're going to do get, and then selected item. Alright, so that will get the text of the selected item. Before it was getting the whole combo box, right now it's just going to get the thing that's been clicked on in the combo box. Alright, so the bit that we're going to be mucking around with now is actually getting the information from the table and playing around with this table. We're going to be updating the results from it. Okay, so just a little bit of a mission to have a look at how this is made first of all. So customize code. We've got this kind of strange method in the middle which we're going to be essentially looking at and stealing and doing things with. So let me just I'm just going to copy it for a second, and then I'm going to put in some values so you can see what's going on. Alright, so I'm just going to put in some things just so you know exactly what different things are going on here. So we've got this weird 2D array. Alright, so we've got a new Java Swing default table model. It's doing jtable2.set the model. So this is the bit that's setting the table model, the default table model. It takes two things. It takes an object, alright, and I'm changing some of the objects to just be x's, alright, so I could write in here and just put in hi if I wanted to, and then I've got another array down here with titles, and if I just put hi in this one just to see that you can change it. So I've got a 2D array of essentially all the data and a 1D array of all the titles. Now if I just click run, just to show you what I've done, I changed that to hi and I put in x's in the boxes. Alright, so it had that weird kind of 2D array, 1D array business. Now I've nicked the code. Alright, just wanted to make a quick video edit here because I'm just going to insert a choice that you guys will need to make for me that I didn't include in the original. So, in terms of what we want our form to look like, when you click run for the first time, we're either going to have it so it looks like a blank square, so the data box looks like a blank square, or it looks like a mini table. Alright, if you want it to look like the table with nothing in it, when you start, obviously when we click view data it's going to put the records in. If you want it to be blank, what you do is you just click customize code and you just delete all the stuff that's in here. Alright, so just get rid of all that and then click OK. If you want it to look like a table with nothing in it at the start, you just leave it as it is and then you just click play. I'll show you what I mean. So when in a minute we're going to click view data and it will actually put some records in. But because we haven't coded that yet, we're either going to have it as a blank box or an empty table. That might be slightly confusing, so we might not want it as an empty table. We might want it as a blank one. So if you do want to do that, now just a little bit of advice about setting this to be null, because some of you might actually set this and write the word null in, because that's what it's got on the video. Now sometimes if you do that, it cracks you out this fun looking error: illegal argument exception, cannot set a null block table model. Alright, so what that means is it doesn't like you writing the word null in, but when you run it, all I'm going to do is click run. Notice the error's gone. Haven't clicked on anything, I'm just going to close it. I'm going to go back to it. Puts the null in there by itself. So if it puts the null in there by itself, it likes it. If you get the error, just delete the word null and click OK. So make a choice for me. Either delete the code that's in it or leave the code that's in it, and then it will show an empty table when you first run it. In this video, when I said I nicked the code, what I did is actually just nick the code and just leave that empty. Alright, so that's what I've done in the video. I'll let you get back to it. Alright, so what I'm going to do very quickly is just paste in all of that code. That was the default table. That's what we're working with. That's what it had in the back. Alright, we're going to be making our own version of this and basically copying it and setting the one in the actual table to be null. But we're not going to do that just yet because we're going to play around with it first, and we need that table model there just so it doesn't cause us any issues for a second. Alright, so we know what we need to do at this stage. We need to get all of we're running the select statement, so we're saying select all of the information from a selected table. Once you've selected that table, what we want to do is we want to work out the headings for the table, so that we've got a string array for the table, in terms of the titles, and then we've got this 2D array of objects, which is all of the data. So we've got two jobs to do. We need to work out the data. Should we call it the rows? Work out the rows. And then we've got get columns. Titles. I should have done that the other way around, and I can't spell titles. 2 seconds. Titles, and then columns. Alright, so we've got two little jobs we're going to do, and we're going to split those up and try and crack through those two. This is a kind of bit of a long method in terms of the method that we end up with, but it will do the job perfectly. Okay, so let's get going on the columns. Let's do the titles first. So let's do string columns equals new string Alright, this bit's a little bit funny. So what we would usually do here is we'd probably put in a number like 5, or like however many columns we think there's going to be. We go, oh, you know, I think there's going to be 5 columns. But at this stage we don't know how many columns there's going to be, and there's going to be a different amount of columns for each table that we've got. So what we do need to do is get that information from the results set, which we can absolutely do. So we're going to do get metadata. So I've got rs.getMetadata dot get column count. Okay, so what that will do is tell me how many columns are in that particular table. And let's just test it so we know that that's definitely the right number and we're not going crazy and everything works so far. Alright, just to point out that I have actually put my method call in the view data button now, so that that now calls update table data. So I've just chucked that in there so that we can call it. Otherwise before we would have had it and it didn't even call the method. So I've just copied that in. And then we're going to go from there. Okay, let's just do a quick run. Okay, from this stage we've got customers, view data. Now all that we're expecting is it's going to print out something. Alright, oh, that's interesting that it's printed this out. It's totally me being a muppet, isn't it? Columns dot length is what we want. So we don't want to print out the whole array. We just want to know that it's getting the right length of the array. So let's just run that once more. So always got to be watching what you're doing. So view data, so that's going to print me out a sensible number 3. Let's just double check that. So let's look at services. Alright, so customer has got 3 columns in it. Let's look at something else. Let's look at, we've got orders, products have got 3. I think the other ones have got 2 in them. So let's just go back here. Order to product link should give me 2. Beautiful. Orders 2. Last one should give me 3. So, oh, hello. What have I, oh, products. Didn't check it very thoroughly earlier, did I? So what that gave me just here is doesn't exist, no pointer error. So that error is a bit of a long one. Syntax error. You're going to see syntax error quite a lot if we're playing with SQL. All my one is that I didn't put an S on my products table. I said it was called products rather than products. So that caused me a little bit of an interesting issue. Don't get freaked out if you see an error. It's gonna happen. Products should give me a 3. There you go, nice and fixed. And all the rest of them were working. That was giving me the right column count for how many columns were in each of the tables. So that's a good start. So we're on to the next bit. Now we know that works, I'm going to take my print statement out. So based on how many just in case we forget a little bit later. Alright, so our next little job is we know how many columns there are, but we haven't got the names of the columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through the names of the columns, and I'm going to get the name of the column and put it into my columns array. Alright, sounds a bit overly complicated, but it's really not. So we know at this stage how many columns there are. There we go, columns.length. So we're going to loop through all of the columns. We're going to put the name of the column into the column array, and we're going to base that off of the result set. So we're going to use the .get metadata again. Metadata, alright. And then we've got some more things in here that we can have a little play with. We're going to get the column label. All right, so the column label is a bit of an interesting one because we can't just put I in like that. We need to do I plus 1. The funny thing with databases is that when you're looking at them like this, it starts counting from 1 rather than counting from 0. So it's going to call that one the first one, then second, then third, rather than 0, 1, 2. So we have to start our count from 1. Rather than 0. So I mean, we could have done the 1 in here, and then we could have done it as equal to. That would have done the same job, but either way is absolutely fine. Okay, so let's leave it like that. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, so at this stage, let me just prove that what we're doing is working. So I'm just going to prove it to you that what we're doing is actually populated this columns array with data. And all I'm going to do is print out the array with all the field names in it. All right. So if I do customers, we've got an array. Array index out of bounds. Interesting. Interesting. What have we got? Let's roll it back for a second. Let's do it like that and see how we get on with that one. I want to know if it gives me a different error. Columns.length. All I've done is just changed it over. View data. Oh, interesting. It didn't like the second method. Okay. So it doesn't like it if you go from 0 and then add 1 to it. It's absolutely fine. But yeah, I suppose the columns array, it was kicking out and out of bounds because of my columns array, because I've done it the exact same size as the column, so I didn't do it as a +1. Do it with this method. Don't do it with your equal to and then -1 off here. Yeah, let's stick with the method that we've just done, because that's nice and straightforward. All right, where were we? Where was my output box? All right, let's just check it. Customer ID, customer name, customer email. That seems sensible. Order to product link. Product ID, order ID. Yeah, that's working absolutely smashingly now. All right, and it will just grab that and then tell me the names of the fields. Okay, so we've done bits of the tricky bit. So I've proved that this works. So we no longer need this part in there. All right. Our next little job. So we've done the top part. We've done the titles part. So in terms of the bits that we've done that. All right. What we haven't done is this part. So we now need to get all of the table data and chuck it into some sort of 2D array. So that's our next job. All right. So let me just put a little annotation on here. Pop you column. I can't spell at all today. All right, so that bit works. We know that bit works. Now we're on to a little bit of a tricky. So we've got to do a few things. So the first thing we've got to do is play around with our pointer. So we're going to play around with our pointer in the table. So what we first had is let's just go view data. So our pointer would be pointing here, essentially. Not at the first one, at the kind of like gap between them, because it'd be going, okay. And then you'd have to do rs.next and then it would grab number 1. I've just set it to be the last pointer. What my job is going to be is to get the row number of the last record. That tells me how many rows are in my table. All right, so I've set it to be the last one, just so we can get the number of rows. And I'm going to call the number of rows total rows. All right, rs dot, and then we've got get row. All right, that will get me the row number of the last record. Get row number. All right, because if we know that, that's nice and easy. Now, the thing that people tend to forget to do is reset your pointer, because we set it to be the last one just because we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the last record. We need to set it back to look at the first one, otherwise it's not going to give us the data that we want. So move your pointer back. I moved it to the end, so if we look at this again, I moved it to the end and went, what's the number of this one? Okay, move it back, and now we're looking at the first one. So if I said give me the data, it will just give me those bits of data. All right, okay. On to the next bit. The next bit's a tricky bit because we love 2D arrays. Okay, we're going to make a 2D object array. All right, we're going to do object rows. Let's call it rows equals new. All right. Question is, what's the length of these things? So things that we know so far, we know how many rows we've got. So that's our first number that goes in, total rows. The next number is how many columns have we got. We could just do columns.length. And that will give us how many columns we've got. All right, so that sorts us our 2D array. All we need to do now is put some data in it. All right, as you know, with these things, if you've got a 2D array, you need to do a nested for loop. So we're going to loop through all of the rows. And once we've looped through all of the rows, we're going to loop through all of the columns. So I'm just using columns.length. Now I could, one of my students once said, why can't we just keep doing this line here? So rs.getMetadata.get column count. If you really wanted to dot that around everywhere instead of columns.length, you are totally welcome to, but I feel like that's a little bit like overkill. You don't need to do that. Okay, rows, I, J, equals. All right, this bit's the bit tricky. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the piece of information at that location in the database back as an object. So we're going to do rs dot get object. All right, so we're going to do get object, and then I need to get the object that's in the column that we're looking at for this particular column. All right, so I'm going to do columns, if I could spell, J. All right, and let me just pause there for a second because that's a bit of a scary line there. rs.getObject. Now let's just focus on just that bit for a second, and I'm going to look back at the orders. First, this is the first class that we had, and this is all of our kind of temp stuff. Now look at this stuff here. We've got rs.getInt, and then it gives you the name of the field that it wants the information from. rs.getString, and it gives you the name of the thing you're trying to find. So when we were doing this, we were looping through and we were going, okay, I need the ID number, so can you get me from the result set, get the integer that's in the column customer ID. We're doing the same thing, but we're calling everything an object rather than an int or a string. All right, so let's go back to our table. We're saying rs, so from the result set, can you get me the object that's in this particular column? All right, and we're getting the column from our array because we've got a list of all of the different column names. And as we're looping through, we're saying, okay, if it's in this column, get me that piece of information. All right. Now, what we need to make sure we also do is do rs.next. If we don't do rs.next, what's going to happen is it's going to print out the same row over and over and over and over, which would be super, super boring, which is not what we want. All right. That is relatively good to go, but all we've got to do, we've got to do two little bits, and then that'll work. Okay, the two little bits we've actually got to do is actually to set the model of the table and then to close the results set. Now what I'm talking about here is if I just go back to here, customize code, we need all this bit. All right, so we've got jtable2.setModel. All right, that's the bit that we're going to be doing. We've already got our stuff. We don't need that stuff. All right, I'm going to set that to be null at this point because I don't want that to be overwriting my stuff. All right, so I'm just going to do null and then go OK. Let's go back here for a second. So again, I'm just going to show you what code we had to put it back in. So we had jtable. What have I got? I've got jtable2. Dot. So mine's called jtable2. Yours might be called jtable1. I'll fully admit that I had a little bit of a muck up earlier and deleted a table. So mine's called jtable2. You could rename the table to be something more sensible. Mine's just called jtable2. We're doing set model. All right. So in there we've got a few things. We needed to do new, and this is a bit of a wordy one. Javax dot swing dot table dot default table model. Whew, we're nearly there. All right. Now at this stage, what some people do is they just put in the two kind of bits of information. Now the way that we could do it, we totally could do it, is just to do rows, columns. like that. That's actually going to work totally. Some people like to lay it out a bit more differently, so you might see that some people lay it out a bit like that. And if you see that, looks the same sort of thing as that. So we had Java access swing, new table model. Let me just get rid of that. So that's essentially the same sort of thing. So we've got the 2D array. Our 2D array was called rows. Our 1D array was called columns. And then you're closing it. So we don't actually need this bit anymore. We're going to get rid of it, all right, because ours is much nicer, all right. So you can do it like that. I tend to like doing it just like that and leaving it like that. You can put it all on one line. It's not going to show you any issues. Okay, slow it. We're going to do J, table 2, because that's what mine's called. Get value at. All right. Now, in this situation, we've got two things that we need to give it. All right, it says width and width. We're going to change those. The first one is get the selected row. So we need to do JTable2 or whatever you've called yours, but yours is hopefully a lot more interesting than mine. We need to do get selected row. Okay, so get the selected row. Now the thing is, with mine, I've organised it so that every single table, the primary key is almost the first one, apart from this order to product link, but we might do something different with that one. Let's stick with customers for now. Let's stick with products. So my product ID is first, and the orders, my order ID is first, and my customer ID is first. So we know that the thing in the first column is going to be the primary key. Okay, so in here, because we're playing around, now this may get confusing because we're playing around with JTables and a database. In a database it counts from 1, in a JTable and in Java it counts from 0. So we're saying the first row is row 0. If we were doing this in the database it'd be row 1. Now all I'm going to do at this stage, just to prove that this works, is print it out. So I'm just going to print out the ID number at that stage, just to prove to you that this is doing the right thing. And this is it's one of these tests that you should always do, because if it's giving you the wrong ID number, then it's doing it wrong. So at this stage I should be able to print out 4. 4, lovely. This should print out 5. This should print out 2. If it's giving you the right ID value, so what you've clicked on, let's go products and then view data, 2. All right. Now this order to product link, the reason that this was a tricky one is because I haven't actually defined a primary key in here. So we're saying it will go off the first one. It might be that you don't allow them to do it on that table or something. You might have to do it on both, but at this stage I'm more worried about the customers and more worried about the product. So I'm just going to say you can delete products. We might not even say you can delete anything if it's on the order to product link or something like that. But at this stage it's printing out the right primary keys. Therefore, we're quite happy to crack on and then do our delete statement. All right. So the next little bit we need to do is we need to do a delete statement. So we're going to use the database handler, and then we're going to use one that's a void. So a delete statement is a void because it doesn't return anything back. Okay. So now this is one of these funny ones in terms of what are we deleting. Let's just go for, we need to give it a string. Of course we need to give it a string. Let's go delete from. Now this is where you give it the table name. So TBL underscore. And we could do the same thing we did earlier by getting the name of the table. So we've got get the name of the table. But this is a little bit of an interesting one, because what you're going to have to do then is you're going to have to say where a particular field matches a certain record. So what I'm going to do, let me just make it just for the customers table. All right, and I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you a different reason that we could be doing it a different way and things like that in a second. I'm going to stick with, we're just going to do it for the customers table. All right, for now, and then I'll put the other ones in a little bit. All right, so we're going to do delete from TBL customers, and then I'm going to do where customer ID equals. All right, at this stage I'm just going to get rid of this output box. Alright, so the last little bit of this statement is to grab selected ID and chuck that at the end. Alright, so delete from table TBL customers where customer ID equals and then the selected ID. The next thing we're going to do is just update the table. Alright, so we're just going to make it all nice and neat and we're going to do update table. So we're going to nick this method, chuck it in here, update table data, just so that it can update the table every time we make a change to it. Now let's have a little look at what that actually does. Alright, let's just run this again. Let's just see what we're doing. So customers view data. Let's click on Jeb and we'll go delete. There we go, he's gone. John. Actually, let's do Paul. There we go, he's gone. Alright, so that works, but it only works for the customer table at this moment in time. So what we might want to do is hide and show this button only when that says customers, because that way then we're nice and protected just in case they click on the wrong things and it starts deleting crazy things, and we don't want errors. So let's just have a little bit of a play around in here. Alright, so my first change is going to be in the view button. So let's find my view data button. There we go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is a quick if statement. So hang on, what did we call? Let me just double check myself. We called it delete record button, right? Delete record button. Just double checking, definitely. So we're going to go if table list combo box. Oh. Dot get selected item is equal to customers. So if it's equal to customers, we're going to do delete record button dot set visible. Alright, else wait a second. So that one's going to be true and that one's going to be false. Okay, so we're saying when we start this, if the selected item is equal to customers, then show the delete button. If not, hide the delete button. Now we're going to try and put this somewhere else as well, because there's one extra place that we want to kind of make sure that we set it to be invisible straight away. So let me just nick this little bit here. So delete record button dot set visible, and I'm going to put it right up in this bit. Alright, so what we do in this part, this is the bit that initializes all of the components. It's the bit that calls all of this horrible code in here, so init components, and then it sets everything up. So what I want to say is, just after it's set everything up, we're going to set the delete button to not be visible. Alright, let's just check what we've done. So I run it. At the moment it's not visible. We haven't clicked on view data yet, so we're saying it's set invisible. If I click view data and it's customers, then it'll show it. If I click on view data for everything else, it will just delete, well, it won't delete that button, but it will just set it to not be visible. So that's quite nice. We could just do that for the customers one, and we can have different buttons for every single one then, because that way when we get to things like order product link, we could change our statement, our delete statement, because we could do maybe it takes into both of the IDs. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just change the variable name on this one, so delete customer record button, because that way at the back end and maybe even at the front end. So let me just do edit text on here as well, delete customer record, because that way and I know that that's all to do with the customer record. If we're just running our program and we're looking at it in the design view, it's going to show it to us. And if we've got 5 buttons that are all delete buttons, that's going to be super confusing. That will have updated all the code at the back end, so don't worry about kind of making sure that it says delete customer record button rather than delete button or anything. Just updates it for us. Okay, should we do one more cheeky little thing with this? Well, let's do add a record. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to do an insert record onto the customers one. So I'm going to just do it on the customer one, and I'm going to show you how to insert a record. But to do that, we're going to need a few buttons first. Now the 2 buttons we're going to start off with, text fields. We're going to put 2 text fields down the bottom. I'm going to make those a little bit bigger. even maybe a little bit bigger because that one's going to be an email address, and then I'm going to put another button next to that there. So it's looking a little bit modular, but we'll see what happens. Let me just get that right out the way of the add button. Okay, so edit text, add customer, change variable name. Now at this stage you're probably thinking, hang on a second, Julie, this table has got 3 things in it, because the customer table has got 3 things in it. But I've only put 2 different fields down. Now, when we're looking, if we just have a little scooch back at the orders part, now when we were doing this, do you remember we were playing around with how to generate a primary key? And it was all this bit over here. So we generated the primary key instead of getting people to type it in for us. So we did this select max customer ID, we did all this, we grabbed the customer ID, and then we did the insert into. This is the bit that we're going to be doing now. Alright, so we're going to be generating the primary key dynamically without having to wonder about getting the customer or getting the person, the user, to type that in for us. So back onto this one, the last thing I'm going to do here is just edit the text and get rid of the stuff that's already in it. You can play around with things like default values and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily going to do that at this stage. We could also do things like add some labels onto them. So let me just put on a little label above each one just to make it look super nice, because we're professionals, me and you. Edit text. And then we've got edit text, customer name. Now we're going to change the variables of these boxes because we're going to do things like get the text of them and things like that. And we want to know at the back end that we've got the right thing. So I'm going to call this customer name box. Now let's go input box. We could call it text box. Let's just go with text box. Let's go with text box. So that's customer name text box. And let's go for customer email address text box. That way there is going to be absolutely no quibble at the back end when you don't know what this is called and you go, oh, actually it's the customer email address text box. Nice and easy. Alright, I reckon we are ready to start getting into the code for this add customer button. So let's have a little, cheeky double click, because then it's going to generate the method. It's like a hide and seek when you get in here. So we're going to put it into this one. I'm always a big fan of just hiding this init components thing, because it's a massive bit of text. And you want a bit of clarity as to where you are and what you're up to. We're looking at the add customer button. You can minimize the other ones. I'm going to leave them open now just in case we need to add or nick some stuff. All right, so we should be ready to put in our try catch. You are going to be well versed in try catches at the end of this project. I think you'll find that I'm trying to do it nice and consistently just for you. Alright, okay. So print out the error. Always print out your errors. That's the one thing that I always say. Always print out your errors in this try-catch business. Okay. So the next little bit. So what we want to do is we want to start emulating bits from this part. So let me just nick this. I'm just going to copy and paste it to show you where we're going with it. And then we're going to do it. Let's just put it in there. Alright, and then we might be able to kind of nick bits of it and refashion it. Alright, so the first thing is we're going to try and do this. We've got select max customer ID, and then as ID number from table. Okay, that should be fairly straightforward. So let's just do that. So we're going to nick that, but we're going to change this to result set. And then I'm going to change it to RS equals. And then we're going to use our old database handler. Dot. Now, what do we want here? We want the one that's going to give us a result set back. So I'm clicking on the result set one. So execute query. Okay, let me just double check ourselves. So we're saying select max customer ID as, I've got as ID num from app.table customer. Now sometimes we've been doing this. Actually, our ones have been working without the app dot, so don't panic too much about that. That's just where you put your database. So if you put it in app dot, it will just be in the app part, or if you put it in your name, you don't need to put those bits in. And it depends on where your database is. So don't worry too much about the app dot at this stage. But if it needs it, make sure you're doing the app dot parts throughout. Okay. Now this I'm tempted to change because we had it as ID number before. I'm tempted just for my own personal kind of getting into it now. I'm going to call it max ID, all right, because it's the maximum ID that we're going to give someone, all right. We don't need this one. Oh, let's do that again. Oris.next, we do need that. In ID value. Now this is not too bad. So we've got in ID value equals rs dot, and then we're going to do, I change that to max ID plus 1. Okay. And then I've just got print out the value. Well, that's kind of useful at this stage. Should we check this works so far? So let's just go in. Now all this is going to do is I'm just going to click on customers and click view data. If I click add customer, it's just going to give me the next ID. So I've got 4 there. It should give me 5 in the output box randomly somewhere. Oh, hang on a second. So what have we got? We've got null pointer exception. TBL customer doesn't exist. Interesting. What do we have it as instead? Customers. Always, when you're flicking between projects, always double check the names of things. I flick between quite a few different projects and then you forget the names of things. My apologies. And again, you might try and print that out a bit nicer than I just printed that out. Let's try that again. 5. All right, we'll keep printing out 5. I can click that loads of times. That's basically telling me what's the next ID. All right, so that we know that's valid. We know in our database at this stage in the game that the next ID for the thing that we want to add is going to be ID number 5. We're looking at this row, this column just here, not the row number. So we're saying the next ID is going to be number 5. Now again, we talked about this when we did this the first time. There's many different ways of generating a primary key. I'm just doing it as get the next number, because that means I'm going to have quite a few records before I run out of steam here. There are many different algorithms to calculate what your next primary key could be, and utilize free ones in terms of if I delete number 3, then I could use number 3. There's loads of different algorithms. I've picked this because I've not got many records. All right, so just don't think that this is the only way. This is just a nice, easy way of doing it. Okay. Now let's get on to our next line. So we've got this let's get rid of these. So we don't need this bit. Statement to execute update. We don't need that part because our database handler is going to do it for us. All right, so we're going to have database. If I spelled that right, handler. Dot. Oh, no, nearly. I nearly spelled it right all the way. Execute update. Now, we're not getting anything back from this. This is a void. Okay, so we're going to do that one just there. Okay, now we're going to do an insert into. All right, so essentially we're going to nick all of this bit. Now, let me just nick that bit and plonk it in and get rid of that. But we're going to change this slightly. And it's a string. The whole thing's a string, so we need to give it a string. All right, and then I think we're nearly there, and I need to grab that ID value and put it just there. It's already in there. I don't need to grab it. It's already there. It's already there. So we're saying database handler execute update query, insert into, and then I'm just going to take the app dot bit out because we haven't got that in mind. I've got customers. TBO customers values, and then I've got this bit, but I've got placeholders because we did Joe and Joe.com. Well, this time we've actually got people to type stuff in. So this is the kind of stressful bit, because we're going to essentially take out that bit, end the string, and add some stuff to it. Now look at where I'm putting this. All right. So if I was going to put what was the first one? It was customer name text box. So I'm going to do. And then I'm going to do dot get text. All right. So look at the format of this. If it's a number, You just need to give the SQL command the numbers, so the ID value goes straight in. If it's a piece of text, you need to put quotation marks around it. So even though my piece of text, let me just get rid of this for a second so it's out of the way. You can see this one here, because it was a piece of text, I put these quotation marks around it. But because I'm dynamically getting that text from a text box, I still need to put the quotation marks around it to tell the database that it's a string. If you don't do that, you're going to have errors. So think about where you're putting things. It should be nice and tallied up at the end. If you get a few reds in between, just step through them one at a time. Just start getting rid of some things and stepping through. This one's my long one. Customer, email, address, text, box, dot. Get selected. Oh, hang on. Get text, not get selected text. Now, some of you might have gone, "Whoo, how did you remember that?" All I did was look over this way. I cheated slightly. So customer, email address, text box, everything's listed just here. It's like my little navigation pane. If you haven't got that Windows and then Navigator, it will just crack open for you. Okay. All right. We know that that bit works, so I'm going to get rid of that. Bit of housekeeping, because I always forget the housekeeping, and then you guys tell me off for it. / you can see me go wrong in it. rs dot close. Alright, so we're just going to close that off just there. Last thing we want to do is update the table. Alright, because if we update the table, it's going to look like it's pinging in there every time we're adding something or deleting something. Alright, so let's just give that a bit of a go. Let's see what nonsense we get. We've got the output box to help us if there's any errors. So I'm going to go view data. Now notice at this stage, cheekily, I've not actually hidden this. I mean, when this, I mean this bit. I could totally go through and just do set visible. You know how to do that, so that's nice and easy to do. So let's do customers, view data. All right, let's go. Paul, let's chuck Paul back in. Poor Paul. All right, so this will be the moment of truth. Yes! Bonus. Hang on a second. Delete him, add him. Delete him, add him. This is working pretty decent, isn't it? It's always giving me 5. Didn't select anything this time. It might be a case that if you don't select anything, you might want to deal with that by updating the error message box just at the beginning, because we had a little error message box somewhere around here. Oh no, that was my other one. We didn't have an error message box, but you could put an error message box, which is just a label down the bottom to say if it is a certain say, for example, if you get an index out of bounds, then just update the error message box. That's nice and easy. Okay, at this stage in the game, I think you are good to go. What I'm just going to quickly do is double check JLabel 1, JLabel 2. I'm just going to, just for my own personal benefit, hide them. All right, so I'm going to go if it equals customers, and I'm going to go J, if I can spell. Well, this is painful. JLabel 1 dot set visible. All right, so let me just nick that because this is going to be the same. All right. It's always J labels, isn't it? All right, JLabel 2 dot set visible. Customer name. Customer email and all right, now again, this is for my own little personal benefit. So I'm just updating it so that if you are on anything else, it hides those particular tables. But also, I need to just copy those to the top so it automatically hides them when this particular form is loaded. Okay, so let's go like that. Way! Oh, we forgot the button. That's a fundamental part. Let's put the button in. Oh, so we're going to get told off. That's not good. All right, what do we call it? No, it wasn't delete. It was add customer. This is quite soothing at this stage. We're just making cosmetic changes to the thing. It's quite calming. Once you've got the scary bit done, these bits are quite nice. All right, view data, lovely, popped up. These are moving, which is weird. Customers moved over that way. I could look into that in a minute. Very strange that it's popped up and moved stuff, but it all works. It all works. Let's delete me in it. Yep, pings up. And then I could look at the other tables and it's just going to show me that data. Okay, so my last little bit is you could totally stop the video here if you wanted to. I'm going to chuck on, just for my own personal benefit, another little error message box down the bottom. So I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to go, okay, let's just make that a little bit more aggressive. And by aggressive, I mean it's going to be red. Let's go for, no, actually, I don't want the foreground to be that colour. Let's just do it as a bit bigger. No, maybe I do want the foreground to be that colour. Let's go red. Okay, that's more of a pink. I like it. I like it. We'll keep it. We'll keep it. All right, so this is going to be my default error message box. All right, so I'm just going to make that down the bottom because I made one in the other video for the single one, so I might as well make one in the double one here. So the kind of error messages that we'll see are the ones that we want to catch in here. So we're going to go, okay, let's go, if I do view data and I do delete customer record, if I haven't selected anything and I get an index out of bounds, it's just going to not do anything, not tell me, but print me out an error message there. Now let's go to the delete customer one. View data, delete. Okay, so it printed me out the error message. Now we have done something sloppy. We did not rename the variable. Let's do change variable name. Error message. It's a label. Let's call it a label. Error message label. All right. So we're going to do, in here, we're going to go straight back to delete customer. We're going to go error message label dot set text. Please select a record from the table above. All right. Does that make sense? Please select a record. Please select around to delete, for deleting, before deleting. All right, to delete. Sorry, I'm faffing with my wording. To delete a record, please select a row, because I want to know what record it is. Please select a row from the table above. Beautiful, I think that's good to go. Now what we've got here is we need to be able to do things like set this to be visible and set this to be invisible. So I'm going to do dot set visible at this stage, and then to be true. So it's only going to show up if we've selected the wrong thing or we haven't selected something. It'd be interesting because really what we might want to do is set it to be invisible from the start. So if we're doing things like the view button, we might want to just set this to be visible. We want to set it to be invisible anyway, to be honest. So we're going to go set visible false. Right, let's just test that. Customers. So my label's not there. If I just click delete, it's going to go, please, to delete a record, please select a row from the, that's not big enough. That's not big enough. Delete, okay. And then if I click on view again, that should go away. Now that's a little bit irritating that it stayed there. So I click delete. And then if I click delete again, so delete a record, please select from the tab. It might be that I do something like a little bit more interesting than that. So hang on a second. So it might be that I just move where I've put the set visible false bit. Because if I've got that, I could flash it up, and then I could do. No, actually, that's okay, to be honest, because they've got to make the change, haven't they? It might be a case that if it's done it correctly, what I might do is just set it to be false again. So that's just hiding it. Now, let me show you exactly why I've put it there. But to show you, I'm going to need to add some more people, so 2 seconds. Paul. haven't got any regular expressions or anything like that on these. So I'm just going to go, okay, delete. To delete a record, and then if I click on that and click delete, it should then get rid of the error message because I've done it correctly. So that's a little bit smarter. Alright, at this stage I'm going to pause this video. This hopefully has shown you how to play around with databases with GUIs to get your information from that database so you can display it nicely to your users.